camera speeding?
And sound.
Sound. All right, Kyle. So this has been really cool hearing your talk. I saw your talk. Was it on the first day, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, it was really great to see that.
Thanks.
And to hear your story. But it'd be great if you can share some of your stuff with my audience as well. So you talked about your origin story. So go back through that process. What sort of got you excited about doing the kinds of things you do?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a child of the 80s, 70s, and 80s.
Yep.
So I grew up on films like Jaws and Star Wars and a lot of the Disney classics and that sort of thing. But I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, which is known a little bit more. Well, the only real connection it has had with the film industry has been old Tucson, where they shot a lot of the old Westerns. But I was into sci-fi and fantasy and all that kind of stuff. So there was, I didn't really think about a career in film or movies. I just like to draw a lot.
Right.
If I would see a Disney movie, I'd come home and I would try to make a comic book out of the movie because it was the only way I could see the movie again. Because it's like we didn't have streaming or even VHS.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me a lot more into drawing. And then even later, when I would see an animated film, I never had the thought, okay, that's what I want to do, because it seemed like something that just was so magical that I didn't connect the dot about how that people were actually doing this until I met a real life animator, Dan Jupe. Met him through a family. He was a family friend, one of my cousins, and he was an animator on The Little Mermaid. Had just done a lot of the Sebastian stuff at Disney. Yeah. And he had a career before that as well.
Was Disney in Florida? The animation was in Florida, or was it?
That was in LA.
In LA.
Yeah,
okay.
because he was so generous with his advice and his time, and kind of saying like showing me the path. If you want to do animation, then you have to go to Cal Arts. It was one of the only schools in North America at the time for that.
And so you were still in high school at this point?
I had just gotten out, and I knew I wanted to do something career-wise with drawing. But he was like, send me your sketchbooks and stuff. And then we had a phone call, and he's like, well, you're kind of drawing like an illustrator, which is fine, but that's just a different way than animation. Animators draw life. They draw the action, and you're not worried so much about texture and light and all that kind of stuff. So it's a different way of thinking. And, just changing that mindset, and then also just knowing that there was a place that you could study this stuff. That had never, I didn't know about that. So he really set me on the path, which is really like a lot of what I was talking about here at THU was like the hero's journey and how the mentor gets you on the path. And he was that for me.
Right.
So just a very generous person.
Yeah, I think it's important to have those first things, those first mentors. I remember when I was a kid, it was not dissimilar. There was this character, there was a friend of the family that would come. We lived in Cairo at the time, and he would visit, and he would stay at our house, with house guests for whatever. And he was an architect. To me, that was kind of like something super interesting. He was just a fascinating person. Definitely. And I said, I want to be an architect. And I was just dedicated to that. And so he took that to heart, because I was only 6 years old. And he helped me with that career to become an architect. And I did. And it wasn't until I became an architect that I realized I didn't want to do that. But I know that feeling of finding someone that gives you that mentorship, and it's kind of inspiring, and it makes you feel confident in the decisions you're making, right?
Especially when they're so passionate about what they're doing. That can be so infectious.
Yes, of course. Okay, so you go to Cal Arts. That's a great school. How did you get in?
Well, I didn't actually get into that story. That's kind of funny. I got there too late to get into for the next year. I was so into it that I left Tucson immediately.
Okay.
Found an apartment in Valencia, California. And I was working when my job back in Tucson was at a sign shop, doing vinyl lettering and sign painting and stuff like that. And I wanted so badly to know what was going on up on the hill at Cal Arts. I made I counterfeited a little parking sticker on my car so that I could drive past the security guard and make it look like I was a student there. And I would just sat in the back of the of the classrooms and just like listened to the lectures and everything. And if the teacher gave an exercise, I would go home and do it. And I made a rule for myself. I'm never going to take any time away from any of the students who like are legitimately there.
Right.
But I built my portfolio based off of the exercises that they were doing. So yeah, this was a little bit sketchy, I suppose.
That's kind of awesome though.
and then I legitimately got
Applied.
accepted and applied and got accepted and went for a couple of years.
Wow. Okay. All right. What was CalOuts like at that time?
It was life-changing.
Right.
I assume it probably still is for anybody who's going there. This is 30 years ago.
Right.
It was, the level of talent about the other students, because you have these amazing teachers, but then you just have like people from all over the country and all over the world in some cases that you can learn from,
Sure.
And the year ahead of me was Gandhi Tartovsky and Craig McCracken and so I mean just like people who became legends in the industry. And then you're just watching them watching Craig McCracken making Powerpuff Girls as a student film.
Right.
And nobody knew then what it was going to become,
Sure.
So just tons of inspiration everywhere.
Right. And it was still very analog at that time, right?
Yeah, it was all hand-drawn. Computer animation was just getting started. And this was like a blessing and a curse because Luxo Jr. was a huge influence for me and one of the things that made me want to do computer animation. And up until that point, the movies that had come out from ILM were The Abyss and Terminator 2. Mm-hmm. And after Terminator 2 had finished, they were upgrading all their computers at ILM.
Yep.
So they donated 5 Silicon Graphics machines to CalArts, and you could submit a storyboard for a film idea, and then you could have access to that lab. So that was my second year.
Okay.
But the program wasn't really developed yet, so we did a lot of like learning how to code Unix and put like textures on things and stuff, like everything that's not animation or storytelling.
This was 93.
93.
Yeah.
And I did I got an internship that summer at Pacific Data Images. Mm-hmm. And Tim Johnson, who offered me that internship, said, I want you to be clear, it had nothing to do with that really awful computer animation piece that you did. It was all because of your first year hand-drawn film.
Right.
That we thought, okay, we could work with you and teach you how to do this.
Right. I was at Rice University Architecture School, and they bought some SGIs for some reason, and no one knew what to do with them.
Yeah.
They sat there, and they were very expensive email machines.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only one that was like, I'm going to figure out Wavefront, because that's all they had was Wavefront on them. And it's like, I don't know why you would use Wavefront for architecture. But nonetheless, we had it on there, and I was learning that stuff there. It was just, you just had to sort of figure it out, right?
Yeah, and it's very unintuitive.
Yes.
We were using...
was it Softimage?
It's not Softimage. What was the other one?
Alias?
Alias.
Yeah.
We were using Alias. There was no inverse kinematics.
Yep.
So, you couldn't make a walk or anything like that without having to like keyframe every frame.
Yeah.
So it was not the best use of time if you're learning how to animate.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you're 2 years at CalArts, and then you went to PDI after that?
Went to PDI, had an amazing internship.
Yeah.
Eric Darnell, Raman Hu, Rex Gridnian, Glenn McQueen. They were all my mentors there.
Right.
And Rex especially, I remember it was one particular afternoon where he just like did some like really quick animation, showed me like the methodology of 3D animation, just like made it all very crystal clear.
Right.
Got it to do a lot of really fun work with Eric Darnell on a film he was developing. I was doing storyboards. So just like a very rich pool of very talented guys. Unfortunately, at the end of that summer, they didn't have any work. They were like, we'd love to offer you a job, but we don't have any like character animation work right now. Morphing was really big.
Oh, right.
That black and white Michael Jackson video had just come out. Mm-hmm. But that same summer, Jurassic Park came out at ILM, and ILM suddenly had like just more work than they could handle with their crew. And it was the choice between going back to school, which had a high tuition, or and I got a job at ILM.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, that maybe I'll do that because I'll continue to learn and I can actually start to do this stuff.
Right.
So they hired me like fall of '93.
ILM did.
Yeah.
Okay, so fall '93. So you were there during when like Spaz was still there at the
Yeah.
point? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Spaz had actually, he came to CalArts the year before
Oh.
and gave a lecture and talked, and he showed some Terminator 2 stuff, but he talked about this project that he was like, it's going to change everything when you see it. And it was Jurassic Park.
Right.
So.
Yeah. He's been on this podcast.
Oh,
before.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a pretty unique person for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, so you're there at that crux moment, sort of working on that. What was the first thing you worked on?
I worked on the Flintstones,
Right.
the live action Flintstones. Did some Dino animation, and then I worked on The Mask.
All right.
And that I worked on The Mask probably just for a couple of months, and that's when a very life-changing event happened. My mother passed away unexpectedly.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I took some time off, and I barely got to finish like the shot that I was working on in The Mask, and did some traveling and kind of went back to where she was, where she grew up in Malta, and that would eventually send me on this like crazy curiosity about living abroad and everything that did land me in Europe about like 8 or 9 years after that.
Okay.
But when I came back to ILM, I worked on Jumanji. And Mars Attacks, yeah.
Right, I love Mars Attacks. It's such a good movie. Okay, so you had a really good time at ILM. Obviously, you've done some incredible stuff, and then you went to Europe right after that, right?
That not quite. Then I was going like anytime I had a vacation, I was going to Europe, putting on a backpack and just like traveling around. I actually went to Pixar after I did a very brief stint at Weta, working on the Frighteners.
Okay.
Then I went to Pixar, worked on A Bug's Life. I was an animation director on Toy Story 2, and then worked on Monsters Inc. And after Monsters Inc., then this like curiosity had built up so strongly about living abroad. That I thought, okay, maybe just for a year, and then it ended up being 20 years that I was there.
Yeah, awesome. Where did you go? Where was your destination?
In the beginning, it was I had emailed a bunch of schools, and just said like, can I come and teach or do a lecture? I just want to like meet the animation community. I want to go to different places. Right. And the one that I had the longest relationship with was the animation workshop in Denmark. And then Lego Blanc in Paris. But during that time of like moving around different places for the first year, I had met Pierre Caffan at Annecy, the film festival in 2000. And then later on, he said, hey, I'm doing this TV series for TF1 in France, animated, and it'd be cool if you want to come and work on this with me. And
what was it?
That was Pat and Stanley. So it's like they were basically, some of them were 15 seconds and then 30 seconds. I think eventually he might have done some...
Wait, it was like a dog and a hippo,
Dog and a hippo, exactly. Yeah. There's so much of the minions in these characters because...
I didn't realize they're all related.
Yeah, well, it's like, that's, I think, a lot of Pierre's sensibility. You know, it's like these two characters who really love each other, but they're also a little bit like rivals, like the minions are. And so they laugh at each other's misfortunes a lot, but all in a kind of loving kind of way. So there's a little bit like mean love. But we worked on that. We did some commercials together. We did some like proof of concepts for features and things like that. And I had been working there and still teaching. And then I started like teaching in Asia and a bunch of other places. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll go back to the States. But that's when Chris Meldandri came with Despicable Me. And he had like a great project, was looking for a studio to work with. Right. And I had been working with Pierre at MacGuff in Paris. And they had like a huge group of really talented people. Right. But they didn't at that time have a movie. So it was a really good, combination. Sure. And I had gotten really into layout and staging and cinematography. Yeah, tell that story, because you were an animation director, and there's a difference between animation and layout, a big difference. Yeah. And so explain that process. Yeah, during my time at Pixar. Yeah. So a lot of the people at Pixar will do like a fireside chat or like a little masterclass. And Jerrica Cleland was the head of layout at Pixar, and she did I think it was like a 10 or 12 week, every Wednesday, we're going to talk about visual storytelling and cinematography. And it really just changed the way that I watched movies, because up until then, I was really involved in the performance of the characters and thinking about movement and acting. But this was more about where the camera is and the staging and where's the audience looking on screen, and even getting into like editorial, like why are we cutting from here to there, and like real filmmaking. And I just like caught that bug about that. So when I was living in Europe and I was teaching animation, I found that more and more I started to like pull in things that Jerica had taught me.
Sure.
And I started reading more about cinematography. So when Despicable Me got launched, at first they were talking to me about being the animation supervisor for the show. But I really wanted to try doing professionally, like now practice, take it out of theory and actually do some layout.
Right.
And with some convincing, they let me be the head of layout
Instead of animation.
Right. It's not a typical like trajectory for an animator to make, because it would be like being an actor and then wanting to become a cinematographer. It's just not, it doesn't happen every day. So that's where the convincing had to come in.
But I think if you gain that skill, then it makes much more sense to become a director at the top, right?
Yeah, I mean, for my part at that time, it was just really just a curiosity of doing this thing. And, you know, it had worked out really well. So Chris said, hey, do you want to go back to LA for a little while and direct like the Minions shorts and some other marketing stuff? And then I was like, yeah, that's like, it was always like these new challenges that kind of drove me. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So you ended up going back to LA and starting doing Minion shorts and directing at this point.
Right.
So was that a new skill set as well, learning to direct?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because in some cases, you know, like even if it was like a small TV commercial or an interstitial or a short film, there was more the opportunity to come up with the main story idea, you know, come up with like the core concept for something. And, you know, up until then, I had been like animating a shot that had been written or shooting a sequence that had been written. But now I was like working more with the writer directly, coming up with what was going to happen, even if it was just in a couple of minute long film. And then like going through the entire process. And it became extremely addictive right away to be in this kind of directing role. And
how different is it to be an animation, directing, not an animation director, directing animation as opposed to directing live action? Because
yeah, I hadn't done any live action directing up until that point.
Sure.
So, you know, one thing I will say that's really different about live action and animation is I like to use the example of like musicians, like a band.
Yeah.
And I think of like live action as like almost, it's more of like a live performance because everything's happening right there. The cameras are on, everyone's going.
Right.
And you can do another take and another take, but once you break down that setup, you're kind of more committed. You know, it gets much more expensive to come back and redo that kind of stuff.
Right.
Animation is much more like studio musicians, where you know you can tweak it and you can refine it. It's more nonlinear. Like a month later, you can come back and change that shot. It's not expensive to do that as like live action. So you have like all this control, and you're sort of not working linearly. So there's kind of, it's safer.
Right.
About maybe like a year or so after I had lived in LA, Chris had asked me to direct a live action teaser trailer for the movie Hop. And that was a trial by fire because I was like going in, the whole crew's there, the cameras are on, and everybody's like, okay, what do you want to do? And I had thought going in the first day that I would have needed to know every single person's job, you know, at least as well as they knew it. Right. And very quickly learned that that's not the case.
Yes.
For a live action director, you know, you have so much support with the AD and the DP and everybody there wants to, you know, just do like work together on this. They just want to know like what's the vision, you know, what's the point of view here. So then I just very quickly started to relax into that role.
Yeah. Was it useful to pick up live action directing and sort of learn those skills and how that applies to animation directing?
Yeah, it's all related, you know, definitely. Even doing animation, you do like a little 7-second slice of a movie. It's like you're going through like all the arcs and like, you know, microcosm that is in the macrocosm of directing the entire film. You're just zooming way out,
right,
and like keeping everything in mind. So like at the end of the day, they're the same job. It's just like a different medium or different kind of timeline that you're working with.
Right.
But the exposure that I had to live action at that point, there's an adrenaline rush that comes with it that, by the end of the day, I'm like more, I just wanted to do more of it. So
Awesome. So did you continue to do live action, or you continue?
that's I'm like going more in that direction these days.
Okay.
But at that point, I did 4 more films at Illumination.
Okay. Tell us the films that you did.
Yeah. So following the Hop teaser trailer,
Yeah.
I joined Chris Renaud as co-director on the Lorax.
Yep.
And then Pierre and I came back together again and directed Minions
Right.
and Despicable Me 3.
Yeah.
And then most recently directed Minions Rise of Gru,
Right.
which just came out.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Yeah. That's awesome work. I mean, it's really cool to see that. You did talk a little bit about the Minions and how they are as characters, and how they sort of evolved. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the one of the original concepts for them in Despicable Me was, like each unique character is something more humanoid, like more elaborate, like muscly guys and that sort of thing. And for, I wasn't privy to like all the conversations that were happening around the creative choices for this at this point, but I think part of it is like, like practical production sense about how like many models that would take to build.
Right.
But also just comedically, because Gru, is such a curmudgeon, gruff character who is very funny.
Right.
But playing him against like really adorable, cute, cuddly minions who are
Right.
like these bright sunshine colors and this sort of thing. There's a really nice contrast to that. So Eric Guillon took some of those original designs that I think Sergio Palos had presented in his lookbook.
Sure.
And went through many, many iterations before arriving at the overall wearing little yellow guys that we know.
Right. Well, they're awesome. They're awesome. Well, that's really interesting. Let's talk a little bit about story and how story has evolved and how you work with story. What's your process when you're thinking about story in animation?
Yeah, it's certainly collaborative.
Right.
So working very closely with the writer and Chris Meledandri, the producer. And there's a core concept that comes up about like the Minions, the origin story of the Minions, Rise of Gru, how do Gru and the Minions like form their relationship. And really early on, we knew that we wanted Kung Fu to be a big part of it. That just always trying to take the Minions someplace new that we haven't been to, with them before. And I think especially when you're doing like a franchise like that, like a sequel, you're one of the challenges is that people love the Minions for a certain quality that the Minions have, and you want to maintain that, but you don't want to go back to the well and do what you've done before. You have to like push it and tell a fresh story. We also knew it was going to be a 70s genre film.
Right.
So like all these things started coming together, and Matt Fogel came on, started writing, working out an outline. The outline turns into like script pages for certain sequences. Then you can identify what the core heart of the film is in the story. Certain sequences go into boarding. So now I'm launching storyboard artists, and we're looking at it that way, editing those sequences. Matt's pushing forward into Act 2, we're storyboarding Act 1. So, like more and more people start like piling onto the movie creatively. You start to have people doing visual development, designing sets and new characters and this sort of thing. But story process alone is trying to find like a visual way to tell the story that's on the page. But then you're also trying to see like, okay, well, that's a really great starting place. And then what else? Like what, especially if you're like working on a sequence with the Minions that don't have dialogue is not driving the sequence.
Sure.
Even though they have funny language, it's like you don't have to depend on what they're saying, and finding a situation. So one of the sequences I showed here was the hitchhiking scene from the first Minions movie, and how a lot of these ideas are coming from the board artists. once you really understand the relationships between Kevin, Stuart, and Bob, and how like Stuart's like pretty competitive with Kevin, and like he thinks he can do a better job of hitchhiking,
Sure.
and it fails, and just trying to find the visual comedy in that. And then Pierre, who voices the minions also, he's adding on to the performance in the boards with his vocal performance, which inevitably like creates new ideas visually that we'll add to, and that goes on into animation. And then also, just to give you an idea about how organic this whole process is that at the same time that's going on, the animators are doing tests, animation tests. Part of it is like if it's a new character, to like make sure the rig's working really well, but more so it's to be like, who is this character? How would this character move and do things? Those tests, like in the case of the acupuncture that Master Chow does, where she can kind of manipulate the guy through his acupuncture needles. That was completely born out of an animation test that we saw. It's like just lit up the room, and then we found a moment for that to go into the scene. So, I think great ideas can come from so many different places.
Yeah.
And then as a director, one of the roles is to just sort of like feel like, where does this fit? How can that integrate? Does it have a place? And then working with Chris as the producer, who has like a very strong intuition about how will that connect with audiences? What's the tone and the appetite for this or that? But trying to find a way to execute all that, and the point of view that you have is like the director's role.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your feeling about the evolution of animations? Have you seen it? Obviously from you were talking about 101 Dalmatians is one of the things. From that level to now, obviously you've seen this incredible development in computer animation, obviously. But do you think there's going to be something new that's going to come around the corner? Or do you think there's going to be another change, another shift?
It definitely seems to be changing. Like the technology is changing all the time. And I think what the technology has done over the years is that it's opened up the different kinds of stories that you could tell.
Sure.
Maybe like a really obvious example is think of like Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And like all the the chaos of like the crowd animation, all that kind of stuff that wouldn't have been possible when I was coming of age and like, watching movies. So I think that's a big part of it. There was, for the longest time too, one of the big questions that would come up would be like, what's new in the technology? And it would be like, well, now we can do, clothes, and the clothes can have wrinkles, and now the clothes can be wet and they can be hanging down, or they can be on fire or whatever, or fur. And now it feels like kind of can do anything, So it's hard to imagine like what would happen next, and but I guess
what about stylistically though?
Stylistically, what I think is great is seeing the medium being pushed into a different look, like Spider-Verse, Ninja Turtles, Arcane. Like this is so refreshing, especially for me as a storyteller and as an animator. Because we're finally getting away from like all these films having a similar kind of look, or the same shaders and that sort of thing. And so much of it is driven, I think, by audiences like responding and resonating with these new visuals. That there's now studios are getting more comfortable to be more experimental.
But I think I agree. I love these new looks, but I think what's ironic is they're imitating looks that are old looks, right? Ninja Turtles is looking like claymation, right? And Arcane is looking like cell animation.
Yeah, exactly.
And then obviously Spider-Verse is looking like a comic book, right?
Right.
So it's all trying to look like something nostalgic at some point, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. Although I'm totally up for experimentation. But I also think that there's influencing, like their stories are starting to get more. Arcane, let's just take Arcane for example. That is a much more serious thing that's going on.
Gritty, like violent, like edgy. That I was hooked on that just from the first just the visual storytelling, the layout, like when they're doing the parkour like on the rooftops and all that, just the sense of like visual storytelling there I thought was extremely sophisticated, not to mention the visual style, but the mantra that you keep on hearing over and over is that animation is no longer a medium; it's or genre; it's a medium.
Right.
And that it's not only being thought of as like family entertainment.
Yeah.
And Arcane's a really great example of that, where it can certainly appeal to younger audiences, but there's a lot more mature themes in it and character arcs, and there's like mental health issues being explored and things like that that are more serious.
Sure. I also think it's interesting to see a lot of influences on animation from other countries, like here in Japan. Like anime is influencing a lot of the ideas and things that we're trying to do in Western culture. What are your thoughts on some of that?
I think it's because of we're so much more connected now. We're getting a lot more of medium from different cultures, and so you have people growing up, watch or like consuming manga or anime who are in the States, in Kansas or whatever, and they know these titles, and I think that's kind of opening the door for studios and producers to feel like, okay, there's now we have a market here. Let's go bigger with it. Let's make a TV series or a movie out of these things. So that's great that the kind of doors have been blown open, and that there's this crossover happening.
Yeah, I think that's kind of nice to see and refreshing to see that, because like you said, it's a medium, not a genre anymore, which is a good thing to say. Okay, what about, obviously there's been a lot of talk recently, and just questions addressed about how some of these tools people are worried about AI tools and things of that nature. What are your thoughts on some of that?
So I'm equally excited and scared about what's going on with AI, because it's very impressive, and it is like, what does this mean? It's certainly, it should go without saying that anytime like artists who've worked so hard to develop a style or a look, and now that is being replicated someplace else and they're not being credited or being compensated, that there has to be something fixed there. But I would say the positive thing, or one way that I'm seeing it in an optimistic way, is that I really hope it will push artists, all of us, to break out of the kinds of patterns that we've been in, and like find new looks and new stories to tell, especially if you can think that an AI is going to be able to do something derivative based off of everything that's been done, because that's what it's like drawing from. It's at least at this stage, it's not truly creating. It's just like
by definition.
Exactly. And I've been listening to various podcasts on the subject of AI, and one thing that I thought was like comforting and a little bit funny was like, if it was truly a general AI with real consciousness and sentience, and you said, make me an illustration based off of like a Frank Frazetta, science fiction kind of scene or whatever. If it's truly conscious, it might just say like, I don't feel like it. I don't want to, and like, that's what real consciousness is, like will, that sort of thing. But I showed one example about character with a character introduction from Willy Wonka and Gene Wilder, and how when he was working with the director, it was Gene Wilder who had the idea that when Willy Wonka comes out of the factory, the way that we'd meet his character is that he'd have a cane and he'd be limping. And then the cane would get stuck in the cobblestones and he would fall, and then the fall would turn into a somersault and he would be like, ta-da. And the director was in an interview with him saying, well, why do you want to do that? And Gene Wilder said, because then nobody will know if I'm lying or telling the truth for the rest of the movie. And that's going to be such a big part of his character. And that idea came from the human being, the actor, who's pulling from their life experiences or what they think is going to work. And that's not something that you can have with an AI right now. I don't know, down the road what's going to happen, but it's only going to give you what you're asking for. And when I'm working with, visual development artists, storyboard artists, or the voice actors, I would never line read Steve Carell. Like, this is exactly how the Gru should say this. because I would be missing out on the 100 different ways he could do it so much better.
Right.
You know, because of what he's bringing, and he's actually fleshing out that character so so much.
Right.
So right now generative AI seems like it can just like give you something derivative of what's been done.
Right.
And you're really missing that creative collaboration that you would have with a living artist. So that's something that I think is extremely valuable.
I agree. I think that people are worried that the studios are just going to use it to save money and not pay residuals.
Yeah. I mean, my kind of theory is that if that starts to happen, I wonder what could be made that would really have so much soul to it that humans would respond to it in a way to make that business model sustainable.
Right.
You know, because if it is only giving you things that we've kind of seen before,
sure,
and not pushing into any new directions, or even like, you know, I was thinking like maybe it's really interesting to see one time like a Humphrey Bogart movie made now.
Right.
And it would be more like the spectacle of like, wow, that does look and move like Humphrey Bogart. But do I want to watch like a bunch of Humphrey Bogart movies from here on out? You know,
right.
and like it feels like it's a magic trick for the moment.
Yes.
And I don't know that, you know, if we only had actors who were computer generated,
right,
like there's like a participation mystique that would be missing. It's something like I would feel like if I go to see Cirque du Soleil,
right,
and I'm watching the performers do these amazing things. What I'm celebrating is that humans are doing this,
sure,
and that there's the danger that they could fall or something like that.
Right.
And you see Tom Cruise like really putting himself out there with like doing his own stunts.
Sure.
And that it feels like that. It's like, you know, he's creating a human experience for you to relate to in the theaters.
Okay.
And I think that that's something that is a little bit more abstract that we can easily forget because right now there's a magic trick happening that's distracting us.
Do you think the same would be true for animation? And let's just put it this way, as an example, right? As a CG animator, you tell them direction and they got to take their time to get it right?
Yeah.
They got to get all the keyframes there, they got to know what to do, et cetera. But what if you just talk to the computer and say, no, just move your foot a little bit here, do this, and then you eliminate like 90% of the job that the animator is doing, or maybe the animator is doing that instead of you. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty good example of that because when you're learning animation, I think in some ways new animators do behave a little bit like an AI, you know?
Sure.
So they're like, well, okay, this character needs to be thinking something very thoughtful. Okay, he's gonna scratch the back of his head,
Right.
you know?
Right.
It's like, because I've seen so many times in animation or like people doing this.
Right.
And so it's such like a cliche kind of move.
Right.
You know, and to be like, no, like pull something from your life, you know?
Right.
Like there's so many different ways you could show a character be thoughtful or be sad or be angry.
Right.
Let's not do like the cliche way of doing it.
Right.
One of the things that for me personally that makes the animation style from Illumination so unique is that the majority of the animators are French. They're drawing off of like their influences and for me there's like a style of animation
Sure.
that doesn't look like American style, and I think that in an American audience I think that looks really fresh. You know,
Right.
it looks like something I haven't seen before, even if I can't put my words on why. It
Sure.
just has a different feeling to it. So I think like I could maybe eventually say to an AI, give me a shot what a character's thinking. But my feeling today, while we're talking, and
Sure.
again, like next year, we could be dealing with a very different animal, but that today you're going to get that first year student, you know, animation scratching the head, like cliche light bulb, finger goes up, that, you know, these types of gestures
Right.
that are just being pulled from what's been done already.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because animation is so much more of a human experience in that way, right? Which the computer doesn't have.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't have. There was one of the picket signs that said ChatGPT doesn't have childhood trauma, you know.
Right.
And I think it's like that. Like these are all the things you're pulling from as an artist, is like your life experiences and things like that.
Yeah.
And your really unique point of view that gives you a way to tell stories, whether that's in your 7-second long slice of the movie or the 90-minute, arc of the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were sort of hinting at the fact you're moving into doing more live action stuff. So what's going on there?
Not a lot that I can talk about too
Sure.
much right now, but yeah, there's a couple of projects in development. And there's been a bit of a pause with everything that's happening in Hollywood right now, but yeah, hopefully those get the momentum.
Is that where you feel like you're wanting to go?
I still have animation.
Yeah.
I want to just tell stories, and the medium isn't as important as the story.
Right.
But I will say that live action is like a paintbrush that I really want to paint more with.
Sure.
So, yeah, that seems really interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. What is, to borrow from Amy, what is your North Star?
My North Star, I think, is like misfits.
Misfits?
Yeah, coming of age and misfits. Like characters who are trying to belong, trying to figure out a way to belong. And like this feeling of family, but like even like improvised family, like that's what in a lot of ways Gru and the Minions are. It's like they are a family that came together because they have the shared commonality of being outcasts.
Outcasts, yeah. Do you feel that that's something that you can relate to in some ways?
I think so. Yeah. I think, having been a foreigner in France for 20 years definitely made me feel like a bit like that. And then, just the way that you connect with people who also so many of my friends are expats in their own right. Even the ones who now are my friends in the States.
Right.
One of my best friends is from Turkey and we have a shared, we can really relate because he was saying the other day, like, if I said this in Turkish, it would be really funny. And I'm like, I totally can relate to that. So,
Yep. It was very strange because I had actually lived abroad, I didn't actually live in the United States until I was 17, even though I'm American. So coming to America at 17, I felt like a foreigner in my own country.
Yeah.
And it was very strange.
It is strange.
It's strange. Well, listen, it's been really great having you on.
Yeah.
I appreciate this. It's amazing stories and great work that you do, and really thank you for that. So I look forward to seeing these new projects that's coming out when you're able to talk about it.
Well, thank you very much. This was fun.
Thank you.